The worst moment of a woman's life doesn't always come with the screech of tires or a doctor's grim face. Sometimes it arrives on a plush, sound-muffled carpet in the VIP corridor of the city's most exclusive charity gala, smelling faintly of champagne and expensive cologne. Serena stood perfectly still. Her 6-year-old son, Knox, looking like a miniature gentleman in his tiny tailored tuxedo, gripped her hand so tightly his small knuckles were white. Downstairs, a string quartet was playing a cheerful waltz, but up here, the only sound was the rhythmic, unmistakable thud against the heavy mahogany door of Suite 3, accompanied by breathy, syncopated groans. And then, a voice. "Hunter, wait, what if your wife comes upstairs?" It was Patricia, the 20-something executive assistant with the sun-kissed hair and a smile that always seemed just a little too bright when Serena dropped off homemade lunches at the office. A low, familiar chuckle bled through the wood. It was the exact same laugh that had charmed Serena into giving up her entire world 5 years ago. "Serena, please," Hunter scoffed, his voice dripping with an arrogant dismissal that hit Serena harder than a physical blow. "She's probably downstairs hovering by the dessert table. The woman's world revolves around PTA meetings and pie crusts. She wouldn't know how to find the elevator, let alone the VIP lounge." Serena stopped breathing. A profound, suffocating grief ripped through her chest. It wasn't just the betrayal of the flesh, it was the casual, brutal erasure of her entirely. She had loved this man. She had loved him enough to step out of the boardroom of Apex Holdings, to bury her own brilliant financial mind. Also Hunter's fragile, budding ego could thrive without standing in her towering shadow. Every pitch deck he presented, she had secretly refined. Every major investor he secured, she had quietly orchestrated from the background. She had made herself invisible so he could shine. And this was her reward, being reduced to a joke between thrusts. "But what about the company?" Patricia purred, the sound of skin slapping skin echoing faintly. "If she finds out, she'll try to take half. You built everything from scratch, Hunter." "I've already got the lawyers on it," Hunter grunted, his breath hitching. "We're transferring the core patents to a shell company in the islands next week. By the time I hand her the divorce papers, there won't be a single dime left for her to claim. She'll be lucky if I let her keep the minivan. I'm not letting some naive housewife walk away with my empire." His empire. Serena closed her eyes. The pain was real, sharp, and blinding. The man she had kissed this morning, the man she had built a life with, was a complete stranger. A parasite who had mistaken the host's generosity for his own strength. She allowed herself exactly 3 seconds to mourn the death of her marriage. 1 second for the love she gave. 1 second for the lies he told. 1 second for the future they would never. Then she felt a slight tug on her evening gown. Serena looked down. Knox was staring at the mahogany door, his large, intelligent eyes wide, with a horrific understanding that no 6-year-old should ever possess. A single tear escaped, cutting a clean path down his cheek. But he didn't make a sound. He just looked up at his mother, his little chest heaving. "Mommy," Knox whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf caught in a winter storm. "I don't want Daddy anymore. Can we go?" Stop and look at the precision of this moment. Hunter thought his greatest risk was a wife screaming at a mistress. He was wrong. His greatest risk was his son realizing he was a coward. Serena allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of grief. One for the past, one for the lie, one for the death of the dream. Then she clocked in. Notice she didn't barge into the room to create a scene. Why? Because scenes are for people who want attention. Serena wanted annihilation. She understood that you do not negotiate with a terrorist who has just taken your child's innocence hostage. You simply cut the line. She turned her grief into a tactical airstrike before the elevator doors even closed. In that split second, the grieving, supportive wife died, and the apex predator woke up. A fierce, icy calm washed over Serena, chilling her blood and sharpening her mind to a lethal edge. He could cheat on her, he could insult her, but he had broken her son's heart. He had made her child cry. Yes, sweetheart, Serena whispered back, her voice smoother than silk, completely devoid of the panic Hunter was probably banking on. She knelt, wiping the tear from Knox's cheek with her thumb. We are going on a very fun adventure, just you and me. She stood up, casting one last, dead-eyed glance at the mahogany door. There would be no screaming match, no tears, no dramatic banging on the wood to catch them in the act. Hunter thought she was a helpless housewife who needed his minivan. He was about to find out what happened when you poke a sleeping dragon in the eye. Serena turned on her heel, her stiletto heels making no sound on the thick carpet as she led Knox down the long, empty corridor. Reaching into the false bottom of her elegant clutch, she bypassed the lipstick and the mints. Her fingers closed around a heavy, matte, black, encrypted phone. It was a device she hadn't touched since the day she traded her tailored blazers for baking aprons. She powered it on. The screen illuminated her face in the dim light, casting sharp, predatory shadows across her cheekbones. She dialed a number known only to a handful of the most powerful financial fixers on the West Coast. The line connected on the first ring. A crisp, highly professional male voice answered immediately. Ma'am, it has been a long time. Serena looked at the elevator doors sliding open, holding her son's hand tightly. Marcus, Serena said, her tone as cold and absolute as a judge's gavel coming down. Hunter's tech firm, pull the plug, freeze the accounts, kill the vendor lines, and initiate a hostile short on everything he owns. I want his empire burned to the ground before breakfast. Hunter adjusted his silk tie in the gilded mirror of the VIP suite, feeling every inch the master of the universe. Beside him, Patricia was reapplying her lipstick, her eyes wide with the intoxicating thrill of being close to power. Hunter smiled at his reflection, admiring the sharp cut of his jaw and the expensive tailoring of his suit. He had it all. The booming tech company, the adoration of the city's elite, a beautiful young woman hanging onto his every word, and a naive, dutiful wife at home who kept his life running smoothly without ever asking too many questions. He was a self-made titan standing at the very peak of his life. Or so he thought, as he reached into his pocket for his phone, expecting a flurry of congratulatory texts about his keynote speech downstairs. The screen lit up with a frantic, pulsing energy. 14 missed calls, 22 urgent voicemails. Hunter frowned, the smugness faltering just a fraction. He dialed his chief financial officer. David, what's going on? Hunter demanded, waving Patricia away as she tried to drape her arms over his shoulders. I am at the charity gala. This better be important, Hunter. David's voice was a high-pitched wheeze, sounding like a man who was actively having a heart attack. Where have you been? The sky is falling. Apex Holdings just pulled their anchor backing. Not just them. Every major institutional investor followed suit. It's a total bloodbath. Hunter froze. The champagne in his stomach suddenly felt like lead. What are you talking about? Apex has been our silent partner for 5 years. We have a rock-solid relationship they can't just pull out. They didn't just pull out Hunter. They initiated a massive short position against us. The market caught wind, and it's a feeding frenzy. Our stock is hemorrhaging. It's down 40% in the aftermarket and still dropping. Use the emergency credit lines, Hunter barked, his voice rising, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. Buy back the dip, stabilize the narrative. I tried, David sounded like he was crying. The banks locked us out. All our corporate accounts are frozen pending a sudden compliance review. We can't move a single dollar, Hunter. We can't even make payroll tomorrow. We're dead in the water. The phone slipped from Hunter's grip, clattering against the marble floor. His breath grew shallow. Millions of dollars. 5 years of climbing the social ladder. Gone. Evaporated into thin air in the span of an hour. He looked around the luxurious suite, suddenly feeling like a trespasser. Miles away, in the quiet, sprawling hills of the city's most exclusive suburban enclave, the air was entirely different. Serena stood in the center of her massive walk-in closet. The space was the size of a small apartment, lined with custom cabinetry, holding designer dresses, rows of diamond jewelry, and handbags that cost more than a luxury sedan. Hunter had bought them all for her, completely oblivious to the fact that he was buying them with the dividends of her own hidden capital. She didn't pack a single one of them. Instead, she pulled a small, worn leather duffel bag from the top shelf with precise, deliberate movements. She folded a few of her comfortable, everyday sweaters. She took Knox's favorite bedtime storybooks and his worn-out stuffed bear. She opened her nightstand and took out a single, simple photo album containing pictures of just her and her son, laughing at the beach, baking in the kitchen, reading in the garden. There was no frantic weeping. The tears had evaporated the moment her son's heart broke outside that mahogany door. What remained was a crystalline, terrifying clarity. She had played the supportive wife, shrinking herself to fit into the tiny box of Hunter's fragile ego, hoping to give Knox a traditional, happy family. But Hunter had taken her grace for weakness. He had mistaken his own luck for genius. Now, she was simply taking her luck back. Mommy. Knox stood in the doorway, wearing his little pajamas, holding a toy car. Are we going on our adventure now? Serena turned, and the coldness in her eyes melted into profound, radiant warmth. Yes, my brave boy, we are. She zipped the duffel bag, slung it over her shoulder, and took his hand. She didn't look back at the grand, silent mansion. She had built this Eden, and she was perfectly fine with shutting the gates on the snake. Back at the gala, panic had entirely consumed Hunter. Hunter, baby, what is wrong? Patricia asked, finally sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Shut up, Patricia. Just shut up, Hunter roared, shoving past her. He didn't care about the gala anymore. He didn't care about his speech. He needed to get to his house. The safe in his home office held physical stock certificates, emergency cash, and the hard drives containing his core patents. If he could just get those, he could salvage something. He could fight back. He sprinted through the opulent lobby, ignoring the confused stares of his peers, and threw himself into his sleek sports car. He drove like a madman, breaking every speed limit, his mind racing with desperate calculations. It is a misunderstanding. It has to be a glitch. I can fix this. Tires screeching. Hunter pulled into the long, sweeping driveway of his sprawling estate. The house was dark, the massive oak front doors looming in the shadows. He ran up the marble steps, his hands shaking as he pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner of the smart lock. He waited for the familiar green flash and the soft click of the deadbolt. Instead, the scanner flashed a violent, glaring red. Hunter cursed, wiping his thumb on his trousers, and pressed it again, red heart pounding. He hastily punched in the master override passcode on the keypad. Error. He punched it in again. Error. Suddenly, the keypad lit up, and the security system's automated voice echoed sharply in the cool night air, cutting through Hunter's delusion like a knife. Access denied, the cold, mechanical female voice announced. Biometrics and passcodes for Hunter have been permanently revoked. You are trespassing on the private property of Serena. Security has been dispatched. What the hell is this? Hunter snarled, slamming his fist against the heavy mahogany door. The sound echoed hollowly across the manicured lawns. Serena, open the damn door. The security system is glitching. Silence answered him. Not a single light flickered on within the sprawling 15,000 square foot estate. Hunter's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He pressed his thumb to the scanner again, leaving a greasy smear. Red flash, access denied. He yanked his phone from his pocket, his hands trembling so badly he nearly dropped it again. He dialed Serena's number. Beep. The number you have reached is no longer in service. A cold knot formed in his stomach, slowly twisting into full-blown panic. He backed away from the door, staring up at the darkened windows of the master suite. This was his house. He had bought this house. He remembered the closing, the signatures, the pride swelling in his chest as he carried Serena across the threshold. How could she lock him out? Before he could process the impossibility of it all, the sleek black gates at the end of the driveway hummed open. Two matte black SUVs glided silently up the winding path, their headlights cutting through the darkness. They didn't look like local police cruisers. They looked like military transports. Four men stepped out before the vehicles had even fully stopped. They were built like brick walls, wearing dark, impeccably tailored suits that barely concealed the tactical gear beneath. They didn't yell, they didn't draw weapons. They simply moved with a terrifying, synchronized efficiency. "Mr. Hunter," the lead man said. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, devoid of any emotion. He stopped exactly 6 feet away, his posture relaxed but coiled, like a panther watching a lame gazelle. "I am the estate manager for Miss Serena. You are currently trespassing on private property." Hunter blinked, his brain misfiring. "Estate manager, what are you talking about? I own this house. I pay the mortgage. My name is on the deed." The man didn't flinch. He produced a sleek tablet from his jacket and tapped a screen once. "According to the county records, sir, this property was purchased outright, in cash, by a blind trust belonging to Miss Serena, 3 months prior to your marriage. You have been living here as a guest. As of 1 hour ago, your invitation has been permanently revoked." Guest. Is there a single word in the English language more devastating to a male ego than that? Hunter spent 5 years walking around like the lord of the manor, never realizing he was merely a tenant with a very generous landlord. This illustrates a fascinating blindness common in a certain type of man: the belief that his mere presence generates wealth. He assumed the house was his because he lived in it. He assumed the life was his because he enjoyed it. He never checked the deed, ladies. Let this be a lesson. Never let a man mistake your generosity for his competence. The locks didn't change. His status did. A guest. The words hung in the cool air, suffocating Hunter. A guest in his own home, a guest in his own life. He tried to summon his usual bluster, the aggressive charm that had bullied tech rivals into submission, but his mouth was dry. That is impossible. We're married, it is marital property. I have rights." Hunter's voice cracked, sounding shrill and desperate. He pointed a trembling finger at the house. "My safe is in there. My computers, my entire life is in that office. Your personal belongings, including clothing and non-proprietary electronics, are currently being packed by our staff," the estate manager replied smoothly. They will be delivered to a secure storage facility in the morning. The access codes will be emailed to your attorney. My attorney. My company is collapsing. I need those hard drives now. Let me in. Hunter lunged forward, pure desperation driving him. He didn't even see the movement. 1 second he was charging the door. The next, his face was pressed hard against the cold, rough stone of a pillar. His arm twisted painfully behind his back. The security guard hadn't even broken a sweat. Mr. Hunter, the estate manager said, stepping closer, his voice dropping an octave, I strongly advise you to leave the premises voluntarily. If you continue to act aggressively, we will be forced to detain you until the authorities arrive, given the current instability of your financial situation. An arrest for trespassing and assault will not serve you well. The guard released the pressure just enough for Hunter to breathe. He slumped against the pillar, gasping, the reality of his situation finally crushing him. He was locked out. He was broke. He had nothing. The empire he thought he built was a sandcastle, and the tide had just come in. He stumbled back to his sports car, the sleek machine suddenly feeling like a joke. He drove aimlessly through the quiet, affluent streets, his mind spinning. The only person he could think to call was Patricia. He pulled into a brightly lit gas station and dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, the background noise of the gala still audible. Hunter, where did you go? Everyone is looking for you. The keynote is in 10 minutes. Patricia sounded annoyed, not concerned. Patricia, listen to me. Everything's gone. Hunter choked out, gripping the steering wheel. The company, the house, Serena. She knew. She locked me out. She owns everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The thumping bass of the gala seemed to fade into a tinny, distant whine. What do you mean she owns everything? Patricia's voice had lost its breathy, playful lilt. It was sharp, calculating. You told me you were protecting the assets. You said she'd get nothing. She's behind it, Patricia. The short selling, the frozen accounts. She's not just a housewife. I don't know who she is, but she has power, real power. Another pause. Then a heavy sigh. Hunter, I can't be involved in this, Patricia said, her tone suddenly chillingly professional. I'm an executive assistant. I have a career to think about. If the company is going under, I need to start sending out resumes. I can't be tied to a sinking ship. Patricia, please. You said you loved me. I loved the CEO, Hunter, she replied flatly. Not a homeless guy having a meltdown at a gas station. Don't call me again. The line went dead. Hunter stared at the phone, the ultimate betrayal burning through his remaining sanity. He was a cornered animal, stripped of his pride, his money, and his mistress. He had nothing left to lose. A dark, venomous thought slithered into his mind. He remembered the schedule Serena kept so meticulously on the fridge. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, Knox had his advanced robotics class at the elite private academy downtown. Serena thought she had won. She thought she could take his money and his house and just walk away. But she had forgotten one crucial detail. She had a weakness, a massive, glaring vulnerability that she loved more than. Hunter slammed his fist against the steering wheel, a feral, terrifying grin spreading across his face. She wants to play games with my life, fine. Let's see how she plays when I have the one thing she can't live without. He threw the car into gear and sped into the night, his destination clear, tomorrow afternoon. Outside, he just needed Patricia to play one last part. The Tuesday afternoon air was crisp and carried the faint, salty tang of the nearby ocean. Outside the prestigious Oak Ridge Academy for Advanced Learning, The street was lined with luxury vehicles. Nannies and chauffeurs idled on the manicured sidewalks, chatting quietly while waiting for the dismissal bell. A beat-up silver sedan, smelling faintly of desperation and stale coffee, sat parked 2 blocks away, half hidden in the shadow of a sprawling oak tree. Inside, Hunter gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Beside him, Patricia chewed her thumbnail nervously, her eyes darting around. She was dressed in an unassuming gray tracksuit, a stark contrast to her usual polished office attire. It had taken Hunter all night and a promised payout from a secret offshore account he claimed he still possessed to convince her to help him. "Hunter, this is crazy," Patricia whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. "If we get caught, this isn't just a messy divorce. It is kidnapping." "It is not kidnapping," Hunter snapped, his eyes fixed on the academy's heavy oak doors. "He is my son. I have a right to see him. She locked me out of my house. She destroyed my company. I have nothing left, Patricia. If I have Knox, she'll have to negotiate. She'll have to give me back what's mine." He was running on pure adrenaline and the toxic fumes of his shattered ego. He hadn't slept. His tailored suit from the gala was wrinkled and smelled faintly of gasoline from his night spent parked at a service station. He didn't look like a tech visionary anymore. He looked like a desperate man clinging to a collapsing ledge. "Just remember the plan," Hunter instructed, his voice low and urgent. "When you see the black SUV pull up, you accidentally bump your car into the delivery van parked on the corner. Make a scene. Yell, cry, whatever it takes to draw the driver's attention. I just need a 10-second window to grab Knox and get him in this car." Patricia nodded slowly, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was a social climber, an opportunist, but she wasn't a criminal. The reality of what they were about to do was sinking in, heavy and cold. At exactly 3:15 p.m., a sleek, immaculate black SUV glided to a stop in front of the academy. It was unassuming, devoid of any flashy chrome or ostentatious branding, blending perfectly into the line of expensive vehicles. "There," Hunter breathed, his eyes wide. "That is her usual driver. It is go time, Patricia, now." Patricia took a deep breath, threw the silver sedan into gear, and lurched out of the parking spot. She accelerated toward the delivery van parked at the intersection, her hands shaking on the wheel, with a sickening crunch of metal. She slammed the sedan into the van's bumper. Instantly, she threw open her door and tumbled out, shrieking hysterically, clutching her arm, and pointing at the van driver, who was just emerging, looking bewildered. The loud crash and Patricia's theatrical wails immediately drew the eyes of everyone on the street, including the driver of the black SUV. Hunter didn't hesitate. He burst from the passenger side of the sedan, sprinting down the sidewalk with a frantic, messy energy. His heart hammered in his ears as he closed the distance to the SUV. He could see the small silhouette of his son in the back seat. He just needed to grab the handle, yank the door open, and pull Knox out before anyone realized what was happening. He reached the SUV, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He grabbed the heavy matte black door handle and yanked it with all his remaining strength. It didn't budge. It felt like pulling on a bank vault door. Panic flared in Hunter's chest. He yanked it again, harder, bracing his foot against the running board. The handle remained perfectly, chillingly immobile. The car felt unusually heavy, planted to the asphalt with an unnatural solidity. Hunter peered through the heavily tinted, reinforced glass of the passenger window. He expected to see a terrified nanny scrambling to lock the doors. He expected to see his son crying for him. Instead, the window glided down with a smooth, silent hum. Hunter froze. Sitting in the passenger seat wasn't a nanny. It was a man with shoulders as wide as a refrigerator, wearing a tailored suit that strained over a physique forged in violence. A discreet, coiled earpiece rested behind his ear, his eyes cold and assessing, locked onto Hunter with the dispassionate gaze of a butcher inspecting a slab of meat. "Mr. Hunter," the man said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that carried over the chaos of Patricia's staged accident. "Please step away from the vehicle." I want my son," Hunter stammered, the adrenaline draining from his veins, replaced by a sudden bone-deep terror. This wasn't a normal driver. This was apex-level security. Before Hunter could react, the front and rear doors of the SUV opened simultaneously. Two more men, mirror images of the first, stepped out with a terrifying, synchronized fluidity. They didn't draw weapons, nor did they yell. They simply moved with absolute, overwhelming purpose. One moment, Hunter was screaming about his rights as a father. The next, he was face down on the hot asphalt, his arm pinned painfully behind his back by a grip that felt like industrial steel. He didn't even see the movement. It was swift, clinical, and utterly humiliating. "Let me go. You can't do this," Hunter roared, his cheek scraping against the rough pavement. He could hear Patricia's fake crying falter in the distance, replaced by a genuine gasp of horror as she saw him being neutralized like a common thug. "We have a situation." The first security operative spoke calmly into his earpiece, not taking his eyes off the struggling, pathetic man on the ground. "The threat has been neutralized. Package is secure." Hunter twisted his head, trying to catch a glimpse of Knox in the back seat. But the heavy, armored door was already closing, sealing his son inside a fortress he could never penetrate. He lay there on the asphalt, the absurdity of his plan crushing him. He had thought he was a mastermind, a brilliant strategist reclaiming his life. Instead, he was a bug splattered against the windshield of Serena's true power. As the police sirens began to wail in the distance, responding to Patricia's staged crash, Hunter realized with a sickening clarity that Serena hadn't just prepared for this. She had anticipated it. She had watched him stumble blindly into her trap, and she hadn't even bothered to show up to watch it spring. He was a clown performing in an empty arena, and the real show was only just beginning. The ballroom of the Grand Horizon Hotel was suffocatingly hot, packed shoulder to shoulder with the city's most vicious media outlets. Hunter stood at the podium, bathed in the harsh, unforgiving glare of a dozen camera flashes. He had spent the last 48 hours orchestrating this moment. After being unceremoniously dumped by the police, Patricia's fender bender wasn't enough to hold him, and Serena's security team had vanished like ghosts before filing formal charges. Hunter knew he had only one card left to play, the victim card. He wore a slightly rumpled suit, specifically chosen to look like a man who hadn't slept, a father driven to the edge of sanity. He gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles white, and looked out at the sea of microphones. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Hunter began, his voice thick with carefully calibrated emotion. He paused, letting a single practiced tear well up in his eye. "I stand before you today, not as a CEO, not as a tech innovator, but as a broken man. A father who has had his entire world ripped away." The cameras clicked furiously. This was the narrative the press loved, the mighty fallen, the personal tragedy. 2 days ago, my company was targeted by a coordinated, malicious financial attack, a hostile takeover orchestrated by my own wife, Serena. Hunter choked on the name, shaking his head as if the betrayal was too much to bear. "She froze my accounts, She locked me out of the home I built for our family. And worst of all, she has taken my son Knox. She has hidden him away, and I haven't seen him since. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the front row of journalists. Hunter mentally congratulated himself. He was winning them over. He was spinning Serena's ruthless efficiency into the narrative of an unstable, vindictive woman destroying a self-made man. I am begging her, Hunter said, looking directly into the main broadcast camera, his voice cracking perfectly. Serena, if you're watching this, please, keep the house, keep the company. Just let me see my boy. Don't punish him for whatever issues we have. He lowered his head, a picture of devastated dignity. He expected questions. He expected the frantic clamor of reporters digging for the juicy details of the divorce. Instead, he heard a strange, collective gasp. Hunter looked up, confused. The reporters weren't looking at him anymore. They were staring past him, their mouths hanging open, their cameras lowering. He turned around. Behind him, the massive floor-to-ceiling LED screen that usually displayed the hotel's logo had gone black. Then, with a sharp electronic crackle, a new image flared to life. It wasn't a logo. It was a crisp, high-definition video, the audio pumping through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. The footage was time-stamped 3 days ago. The location was unmistakable. Suite 3 of the charity gala. Hunter's blood ran cold. The color drained from his face as he stared at the screen. It was him. And Patricia. The audio was horrifyingly clear. Serena, please. She's probably downstairs hovering by the dessert table. The woman's world revolves around PTA meetings and pie crusts. The ballroom erupted. Reporters gasped, furiously scribbling notes, some pointing their cameras directly at the screen. Hunter stood frozen at the podium, a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. The video cut flawlessly to the next scene. We're transferring the core patents to a shell company in the islands next week. By the time I hand her the divorce papers, there won't be a single dime left for her to claim. She'll be lucky if I let her keep the minivan. Turn it off, Hunter screamed, his voice raw, frantic, losing all traces of the grieving father. He lunged toward the AV booth at the side of the room, but 2 massive security guards materialized out of nowhere, blocking his path. The video didn't stop. It cut again, this time to the street outside Oak Ridge Academy. The footage was undeniably from a dashboard camera of a black SUV. The silent, unblinking eye of the camera showed Hunter sprinting down the sidewalk, face contorted in an ugly, desperate snarl, violently yanking on the door handle of a car while his son sat inside. It showed his swift, humiliating takedown by the security team. It showed exactly what he was, a chaotic, pathetic threat. The video ended, and the massive screen went black again. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, heavy with shock and disgust. The grieving father narrative lay dead and bleeding on the floor. Then, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open, the rhythmic click-clack of stilettos on marble cut through the silence. Every head turned. The sea of reporters parted like the Red Sea. Serena walked into the room. She wasn't wearing a floral dress or a baking apron. She was dressed in a tailored, immaculate white power suit, her hair sleek, and her posture radiating an absolute, terrifying authority. She looked like a woman who could buy and sell the entire hotel before her morning coffee. She walked directly past the stunned reporters, her gaze fixed on the podium. She didn't look at Hunter with anger or sadness. She looked at him with the cold, clinical detachment of someone inspecting a defective product. She reached the podium, stepping around Hunter as if he were a piece of discarded furniture, and adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon," Serena said, Her voice was smooth, cultured, and carried the effortless weight of old money and immense power. The room held its breath. For the past 5 years, I have been known as Serena, the supportive wife of Hunter, the self-made tech CEO. She let the words hang in the air, a faint, razor-sharp smile playing on her lips. But my name is Serena Vanguard. I am the sole heir and acting chairwoman of Vanguard Holdings. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Vanguard Holdings wasn't just a company. It was a ghost in the financial machine, a multi-billion-dollar behemoth that owned vast swaths of prime real estate and tech infrastructure across the country. I built my husband's company, Serena continued, her voice perfectly steady. I provided the seed capital through a blind trust. I secured his initial patents. I structured his board. I did this because I loved him, and I wanted him to succeed. She turned her head slightly, locking eyes with Hunter, who was pale, trembling, and physically shrinking away from her. But I do not invest in bad assets, Serena said, the ice in her voice finally cracking through. And I certainly do not tolerate a man who mocks the mother of his child while attempting to steal her money, nor a man who traumatizes his own son in a desperate, violent tantrum on a public street. She looked back at the cameras. As of this morning, Vanguard Holdings has liquidated its entire position in his company. The estate he claimed to own is, and always has been, my personal property. And the hostile takeover he mentioned. Serena smiled, a terrifying, beautiful expression. You cannot take over what you already own. I simply repossess my property. This is the moment the supportive wife's mask hits the floor, and we finally see the CEO underneath. We're possession. It is clinical. It is cold. It is completely devoid of romantic sentiment. Hunter tried to spin a narrative of a vindictive ex-wife stealing his hard work. Serena corrected the record. She wasn't stealing, she was auditing. She didn't destroy his empire out of spite. She liquidated a non-performing asset. It's a masterclass in narrative control. She didn't argue with his lies, she simply presented the receipts. And in the world of high finance, receipts always speak louder than tears. The flashes erupted again, a blinding storm of light. Hunter sank to his knees behind the podium, completely destroyed, the magnitude of his foolishness finally crushing the breath out of him. I am filing for full custody of my son, Serena finished, stepping away from the microphone. And I will be directing the recovered funds into a new foundation dedicated to protecting women and children from financial and emotional abuse. Thank you. She didn't wait for questions. She didn't look back at the broken man on the floor. She turned and walked out the same way she came in, leaving a trail of absolute devastation and awe in her wake. The queen had reclaimed her throne, and the jester was finally out of material. The aftermath of Serena Vanguard's press conference was not a slow burn. It was a detonation that leveled Hunter's world in an afternoon. The media frenzy was instantaneous and merciless. The footage of Hunter clawing at the SUV window, juxtaposed with the crisp, undeniable audio of his infidelity and financial plotting, played on a loop across every major news network and social platform. The Silicon Valley maverick narrative was dead, replaced by the reality of a pathetic, greedy opportunist who had bitten the hand that fed him and tried to steal the arm. Within an hour of the broadcast, the remaining board members of Hunter's tech firm, panicked by the sudden, catastrophic withdrawal of Vanguard Holdings, convened an emergency meeting. Hunter was terminated as CEO before he even made it back to his cheap motel room. His severance package, dictated by the very contracts Serena had secretly helped draft years ago, was entirely contingent on moral turpitude clauses. clauses he had just spectacularly, publicly violated. He was left with nothing but the lint in his pockets and the devastating realization of his own profound mediocrity. Patricia, the ambitious assistant, fared no better. The internet is a cruel and efficient machine. Within hours, her identity, her emails, and her desperate attempts to leverage her affair with Hunter into a promotion were exposed. She was fired immediately, her name blacklisted across the industry. When she tried to call Hunter from a burner phone to demand the offshore money he had promised her for the staged accident, the number had already been disconnected. She was left alone in a rapidly emptying apartment, the collateral damage of a war she had foolishly thought she could win. Hunter, meanwhile, was experiencing a different kind of free fall. He sat on the edge of a stained motel bed, staring at the muted television screen, playing the news cycle of his own destruction. The silence in the room was deafening. There were no assistants rushing in with coffee, no sycophantic investors calling to stroke his ego. For the first time in 5 years, he thought of Serena not as an extension of his own needs, but as a person. He remembered the smell of vanilla and cinnamon that always lingered in her hair when she hugged him. After a long day, he remembered the quiet, steady way she would listen to him vent about his business rivals, her eyes soft and understanding. He remembered the way she looked at Knox. A profound, suffocating regret washed over him, far more agonizing than the loss of his company or the mansion. He hadn't just lost a fortune. He had thrown away the only person in the world who had truly selflessly loved him. And he had done it for the fleeting thrill of an office affair and the hollow validation of his own inflated ego. He scrambled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently, he dropped it twice. He needed to apologize. He needed to explain. He needed her to understand that he had made a terrible, stupid mistake. He dialed her number. The number you have reached is no longer in service. The automated voice was a physical blow. He tried the estate manager's number, blocked. He tried the security firm, blocked. He was entirely, thoroughly excised from her life. 2 days later, the final blow landed. Hunter was walking out of a cheap diner when 2 plainclothes detectives approached him. They didn't look angry, they looked bored, which somehow made it worse. "Hunter Sterling," one of them asked, flashing a badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include attempted kidnapping, reckless endangerment, and we've got some federal boys interested in the financial fraud you detailed on tape." Hunter didn't fight. He didn't scream. As the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he simply sagged, the last remnants of his arrogance draining away into the dirty pavement. He looked up at the gray, overcast sky, the weight of his own hubris finally crushing him. He had thought he was the architect of his own destiny. He had never realized he was just a tenant in Serena's world, and his lease was up 6 weeks later. The California sun was brilliant and warm, reflecting off the vast, glittering expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The air smelled of salt spray and blooming bougainvillea, a stark contrast to the sterile, conditioned air of the city. Serena Vanguard stood on the expansive wooden deck of a stunning, modern beach house, nestled into the cliffs of Carmel by the sea. She wore a simple, flowing linen dress, her bare feet resting against the warm wood. She held a mug of steaming coffee, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. She looked younger, lighter, the invisible weight of the past 5 years completely gone from her shoulders. The dutiful housewife was a ghost, and the vengeful queen had retreated, leaving behind a woman who was simply profoundly at peace. "Mommy, look," Serena turned. Down on the private stretch of white sand, Knox was furiously digging a moat around a massive, intricately structured sandcastle. He was covered in wet sand, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead, his face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. He wasn't the terrified boy trembling outside a VIP suite anymore. He was a child again, safe, loved, and entirely unaware of the storm that had raged to protect him. I see it, my love, Serena called back, a genuine, radiant smile breaking across her face. It's a magnificent fortress. She set her coffee down and walked down the wooden stairs to the beach. As she sank her toes into the cool, wet sand, her phone buzzed softly in the pocket of her dress. It was a message from Marcus, her lead financial fixer. The liquidation of the Sterling assets is complete. The Vanguard Foundation for Women and Children is fully funded and operational. The first grants have been distributed. Serena read the message, her expression serene. There was no triumphant smirk, no lingering bitterness. The past was a closed ledger, the account settled, and the balance transferred to something that actually mattered. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and didn't look at it again. Mommy, can you help me build the tallest tower? Knox asked, holding up a plastic bucket, his eyes shining with expectation. Of course, sweetheart, Serena said, kneeling in the sand beside him, the ocean breeze catching her hair. We can build it as high as you want. There's no limit to what we can build together. She plunged her hands into the wet sand, the cool grains slipping through her fingers. She was Serena Vanguard. She was a mother. She was a force of nature. And for the first time in a very long time, she was exactly where she belonged. The tide rolled in, smooth and relentless, washing away the footprints of the past, leaving the shore clean, perfect, and ready for whatever came next. Let's discuss the minivan camouflage. Serena Vanguard practically invented a new category of warfare here. She hid a multi-billion-dollar intellect behind a PTA schedule and a tray of homemade muffins. Hunter looked at her and saw a domestic accessory. He saw a woman whose biggest concern was pie crusts. Because he was too busy admiring his own reflection, he failed to notice that the woman baking the pie also owned the oven, the kitchen, the house, and the mortgage company. He made the fatal error of confusing supportive with subservient. He thought her silence in the boardroom was ignorance. It wasn't. It was the silence of an editor correcting a sloppy manuscript. She let him play king because it made him happy, and she loved him. But the moment he disrespected the queen, and worse, the prince, she reminded him who actually commands the army. There is a profound peace in knowing you are the table, not just the decoration on it. Serena didn't need to scream at the press conference. She didn't need to beg. She simply pulled her capital. Men like Hunter believe they are self-made right up until the check bounces. They forget that behind every great man is often a woman quietly fixing his spreadsheets, smoothing over his PR disasters, and funding his ego trips. So here's my question for you tonight. Are you the silent partner in your own relationship? And if you decided to call in your loans tomorrow, would your partner still be standing, or would he collapse like a open? I'm listening, Madam Readout.